Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We are live and we are here with Ivan Gonzalez from Recycler, CEO. Thank you very much for joining us, Ivan.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
Very excited to see and hear everything that you've got to tell us. We're here talking about unlocking packaging's green potential. So really looking at insights from sustainability. So this is really an exciting topic. I think it's a big, I don't want to say trending topic because sustainability isn't a trend. This isn't something that's going to go away next year. But it's certainly something which is a movement, let's say, which is very much top of mind for a lot of brands. But before we dive into that, Ivan, I need you to tell us something exciting, interesting about you that not many people know.
So I suppose not a dark secret, but yeah, some people know it, but I'm a huge fan of comics. So I read comics almost every day.
Okay. Captain Planet?
No, mainly Batman, but any
All
comics.
right.
I'm happy with anything.
Captain Planet's all about sustainability, if you don't
Yes,
know.
I
Oh,
know.
you do know. All right, cool. Taking something down to zero, if I remember the theme tune correctly. Brilliant. So you're a comics man. Love it. Right. So now we've heard about that. Let's talk a little bit more about innovative, sustainable packaging solutions. I know you've been implementing lots of different things in the industry. Maybe just take us a little bit through it. I'm going to hand to you to share the screen.
Okay, let me explain a bit. So basically, since we started in this initiative, we've been seeing many sustainable initiatives around packaging. Before it was, as you were saying, more trendy. Now it's embedded in the sector, in the industry, in the consumers. And mainly there are some things that are worth mentioning that not, for example, in the European Union are going to become mandatory. So for example, reducing plastic packaging or plastic or any packaging. So for example, there are very good examples of multi-packs that are attached, so for example, cans that are attached with glue. So basically avoiding these 6 rings holder labels, bottles that are also in the market, reuse and refill that someone is going to explain it afterwards.
That's
But
right,
also
yeah.
switching plastic to paper, I think where it makes sense, I would say. So for example, there's a very interesting initiative of Coca-Cola changing the multi-packs for the 1.5 liter for carton. Super interesting. I touched them. It's amazing how this holds these 6 packs. But mainly what is more interesting is the design for recycling. So mainly changing the packaging for monomaterials, changing inks, colors, glues, things like that to become more sustainable. And then new packaging, and some of these we've been involved in that with, for example, the paper bottle company, the Pavoco. So they produce a paper bottle to change the sector mainly. They also use paper caps, something very interesting. So in this case, for example, we're helping them to tell their consumers this. So why this bottle is better than the conventional one, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, connected packaging is one of those initiatives around sustainability and packaging that it's very interesting. So projects that we've also been involved on, functional inks that you can tell the consumer if an ice cream is good to eat because of the temperature. So you put less sugar, for example, printed electronics to have NFC printed on the packaging, freshness indicators, things like that. So mainly all these packaging sustainability innovations, all of them, they are in the same aspect. So the company is having this duty and this responsibility and being committed to do something with their packaging. And I think today it was mentioned. So consumers, they are still facing uncertainty. They don't know exactly these claims if they are true or not.
Yeah.
So mainly right now there's a disconnection between what companies are doing, all the efforts in sustainability they are doing, and the consumers. Right now we are very confused about that. There's new packaging that we don't know exactly what's there, etc.
There's definitely there's a mismatch in terms of information, I think, in market as well. yes, I think some solutions are great where we moved from plastic to paper, but also there are some instances where plastic actually, and we are talking about reusability later on. So thank you for bringing that up. But you know, there's a really good use case for plastic for reusability as well. Obviously, paper is not going to be reusable. Which is the better solution? And I don't think it's plastic is bad and paper is good. But also, you talk a lot about kind of greenwashing and uncertainty. There seems to be a need for a voice of truth as well, which I see coming out quite a lot in a lot of different ways across brand communication and consumers really asking those questions as well. What is this? What does that really mean? I don't think consumers just kind of sit back and believe everything. They want to also see proof as well. How do you feel that the sustainable packaging innovations are really aligning with consumers' needs?
So let me share the screen because I have
sure.
something here. I think it's this one, hopefully. Okay, here. So mainly on the left side. So basically, we know that consumers, they are demanding help from brands to be more sustainable, to understand what's that packaging, what these efforts around best practices in production, reducing packaging, reducing ingredients or changing ingredients for healthier ones, things like that. So they are demanding this information. They are willing to switch to a brand that offers this information and offers this in a trust environment where you can say, okay, they are saying the truth. And for example, European regulations around greenwashing, they are coming into effect, and this is one of those. So you will see on the packaging many times that this packaging is fully recyclable. Yeah, everything is. It depends what you mean about recyclable, right?
Exactly. But can it actually be recycled? That's the question. Yes, it can theoretically, but if it can, how? Yeah, exactly.
So we are talking about compostability. Everything is compostable. It depends how many years you leave it there, right? So at some point is this need of consumers. So all these sustainability innovations are going into that directions. So mainly one of the channels that is very interesting is the packaging itself. So, and we've seen, for example, with surveys we are doing with consumers, we have clients. Mainly, most of 60% of them they use in the past year more than once a QR code to know something about the packaging. But the consumer experience and the connected experience is not very good. They don't know. Mainly, you go to a website, there's a campaign, but nothing else. There's no meaningful information in this initiative. So normally you see an interaction with this connected packaging between 1 and 10. In very good cases, maybe a 15%, things like that. But I would say this would be the average. So how can we increase that? How can we use this connected packaging to tell more about all the efforts me as a company I'm doing into this topic, right? Recently, I was talking to a client and she was saying, yeah, we are doing this. So basically, everything they could do, they were doing it. And now they were talking to their consumers to understand what information did they want, because they didn't have the space on the packaging. The interaction on the connected packaging was not very good. So basically, how can we increase this interaction with consumers and allow the connected packaging be a new direct to consumer channel, right? And something we've seen, and this is what we've been working these years, is providing information to consumers about recycling. And we tell them, we ask them, okay, what's your interactions with these QR codes? When you see that the profile of consumers that are scanning these QR codes, you see that the ones that are recycling more, they are the ones that have a higher engagement. So it's quite interesting that consumers that also have a responsibility with the packaging, they are also responsible for knowing more about the product. So they will be willing to interact more with your brand, with your product, with the codes you are putting in the market. So one thing we are seeing into this topic is that, for example, right now in the European Union, this is going to be mandated. So on packaging recycling label that will tell you the material, where to dispose it, etc. The reality is that these labels are not very effective. They are effective on consumers that recycle. Right? So if you see this graph there, you could see that this is not effective on the low so consumers that don't recycle or recycle not so many often. So how can we do that? And this is something we've been doing with many clients before, and mainly is offering information, offering rewards, how to properly dispose, how to do that in the streets with curbside, with communal street bins, deposit and refund systems, for example, things like that. And you see when you deploy one of these solutions through a connected packaging, that the interaction with the low recyclers is increasing like immensely, right? So basically with these solutions, with the connected packaging and offering this information and helping consumers that they don't know how to properly sort and how to properly dispose of their packaging to recycle, then you get consumers that are more engaged with you. They are more engaged with your brand and with your products. And for example, we have one use case. Let me show you.
Sure.
One use case we have with Carrefour in Spain. This is quite interesting because I wanted to show it because it's a bit different from the ones that you are talking today and you are showing today. It's not about scanning something on the product. It's something a bit different. So mainly the interaction you do it with your shopping receipt, and then you get a list of products. And from there, you can know exactly everything about your packaging. So basically, we are not creating a connected packaging experience, we are doing it in the background. So for consumers,
you should leave, Ivan. I'm joking. No, it's super interesting. I think just explain again, because I know we've spoken before, so I know about this, but I'm just thinking for people who might not have heard about this before. Can you just explain again exactly what you mean from the receipt rather than the packaging?
Yeah. So mainly when you use this, it's a web application. So basically you don't need to install anything. You can also use it in the Carrefour app. So mainly is, okay, I did a purchase on Carrefour. I go into the service and I import my ticket, my purchase. And from there, you get a list of products that you bought. You don't need to interact with the 100 products that you purchased. So it's an easier way to do that. At some point, it's connected packaging because we are creating an IoT solution for that. So we have the units of every product you buy, etc. But at the end, is the simplicity for the consumer. And for example, all these packaging innovations I was mentioning before, all of them, the successful ones are the ones that are simpler for the consumer. They are frictionless. So basically, I can switch from this paper to this plastic to this paper, or switch off this holder for the can rings, right? So in this case, it's exactly the same. I just import my products, and then when I want to recycle them, I just click there, and I see all the information I need to know based where I am. So not just how to sort it, where I am. If I don't know how to recycle from a plastic bottle, a cup, a coffee capsule, textiles, anything that you can purchase in these supermarkets. And in this case, it's quite interesting because it's not just Carrefour brands and their products. It's also the ecosystem of suppliers that are offering information. And you can see here the family picture of these brands that are also committing with Carrefour to deliver this to the consumer. So mainly most of the products that you can buy in Carrefour in Spain, mainly you have a solution and know exactly how to properly sort, how to properly recycle, and we reward this action. So basically we introduce gamification systems and also discounts for these actions. So, and this is the connection, I think, between innovations on sustainability and also how to do a match with the consumer needs. And this is it. You help them recycle more. You give them more information. We also offer information about why this product is better, the packaging is better, why the product is more sustainable, etc. And mainly we have around 6 million products recycled every month with this solution. So it's quite interesting, and it's helping them recycle more. And this is also creating more loyalty. So they are going in more to Carrefour. They are going to spend more money. They're increasing sales 26%.
Wow.
So of course, so with our users, not,
a tangible number there as well, and not insignificant, 26%. Can you just also roll back a little bit, because I live in Spain, we probably all know that, and obviously you're talking about Carrefour, and this is something which happened in Spain. Now, definitely there are differences in where things are recycled depending where I live. Are you saying that this actually enables consumers to be able to have the information correct for them depending on where they live, as well as the packaging and the product that they bought?
Yes and no. Of course, you can find a lot of different packaging items. So there are two things quite interesting in Spain. In Spain, the collection of packaging is standardized in the whole country. So you know that packaging made of plastic, multi-layer, and metal goes into one bin. The paper goes into another. The glass goes into another.
Mhm.
There's no question about that. Any person that wants to know that is exactly the same in any council. So it's standardized and harmonized in the whole country. Second thing is that most of the products in Spain that you can find in the supermarkets, they have these icons for recycling. So even when you have a standardized collection stream in Spain, even though that there's information on the packaging on how to properly sort, you get these numbers with Carrefour. Right? Of course, you can find exceptions like coffee capsules, textiles, organic material like corks, for example, things like that, that could be different from one council or one municipality to another, but mainly is consumers, they don't just want information, they want help, but they also want a gamified experience, a very good connected experience. And this is what we are offering Carrefour and also their suppliers.
Yeah, really, really, really interesting case study. And I think not only about how many things are being recycled or additional things are being recycled, but also there's an increase in sales. So the impact on business is that more users are using Carrefour, which of course is fantastic, and therefore more things will be recycled as well. So that's an ongoing cycle, which of course is exactly what you want to do. How can other companies get involved in sustainability packaging solutions? What do you see in terms of this kind of economic benefit? Environmental objectives? Should it really just be about their revenue? Should it be about doing good things? Talk to me a little bit about other companies and brands' perspective.
I suppose our approach, at least, is that companies, they are releasing this packaging into the market, so they have the responsibility to do something. Of course, there are entities that are responsible for that, EPR schemes, sector, etc. But if you take an active position into that, then you can translate that into loyalty from your consumers. You can explain this history about what you're doing, what's all of that. So we had also a very nice experience with Fairy in the UK, telling consumers why Fairy was more sustainable, because people will buy it because maybe they like the product and that's it. They don't buy it because they think it's more sustainable. So after telling the consumers that the production was made in a way that the energy consumed was or renewable, the plastic was recycled, et cetera, after providing this information to consumers, the perception of the brand changed a lot. So basically 98% of consumers decided, okay, Fairy is sustainable. So this had also translation into the revenue. So at some point is, your duty is this, but you can have an active role and become part of this solution and help your consumers, because we know that this is a demand from them. And then the economic viability of that will be just via loyalty, via sales. And this is something that we experience with every client we have.
I think one of the things that kind of comes up quite a lot when we start talking about how we implement sustainable connected packaging, and I'm sure it'll be the same for the Carrefour or any other work that you do, is how do you tell the consumer about it in the first place? So a lot of the time, our brands are asking us, well, how do we make sure that people know to scan the packaging? And in your instance, I suppose it's how do you let the consumer know that they can scan the receipt and get the recycling information? How do you do that comms piece?
That's the tricky part. So we always provide white label solutions. So this solution we have for Carrefour is unique. The solution we built for Fairy in the UK was unique. The solution for Pavoco is unique. So they are responsible to do all the communication and all the marketing effort. And that's tricky because it's also quite complex to do that. So mainly, if you talk about connected packaging, then you have the packaging itself as a communication channel to do that. So you need a very engaging CTA, so a call to action, and basically telling them, hey, recycle and get rewards. This is a very, very powerful call to action. So this will translate into a higher user acquisition. And then from there, it's quite easy to do that. So of course, information, but rewards is a big pillar on that.
Definitely. I mean, we see the same. If you incentivize the consumer to do something, then it's beyond just relying on their good hearts, you might say, a reward of some sort. But we've seen rewards of all different types as well. So we've seen rewards being sustainability linked. So just obviously we're talking about sustainability. We created a program where it was a loyalty card, but instead of receiving the reward as a personal reward, you actually had the choice to plant a tree in one of these different regions, for example, another one to give to a particular charity that you choose. But I absolutely agree. If you can have something around winning incentive rewards, it certainly helps. Time for a quick poll. So let's quickly go to our audience and see what our audience think. The question is, when purchasing a product, which aspect of sustainable packaging do you prioritize the most? Is that going to be reduction of packaging waste, use of recyclable materials? Is it energy efficient production processes or carbon footprint reduction? So I'm going to leave that for a second, but I'm going to move to you, Ivan. As a consumer, not as the CEO of Recycler, what would you say when you're purchasing a product is the aspect that gets you most when thinking about that purchase decision?
So for me, mainly it's third party certification. So if I see something that is bio-certified or FSC, things like that, it's okay. I can trust this part. Of course, there are exceptions, but mainly that, and of course local. Sometimes it's difficult to buy that in the supermarkets. But if you talk about packaging, well, I'm in this industry, so I know how these companies behave. So basically, I choose the companies I know which best practice are they using, which environmental efforts are they doing, etc. So mainly, it's, I think I'm not the typical consumer in this sense.
You're not the typical consumer, no. But it's certainly, I think you're talking about verification or certification of actually doing the truth, should we say. All right, taking a look at the poll here, the results are showing reduction of packaging waste at 47%, use of recyclable materials. So that's what's being called out as the most important there at 31%, carbon footprint reduction 19%, energy efficient production process is 3%. And I think it's because it's quite difficult to understand the production process and to communicate that as well. Really, really interesting there. So it's about the packaging waste as number one and use of recyclable materials as number two. Anything that you want to add or comment about those?
No, I think brand owners are basically looking into this. So before, maybe 2 years ago, companies were looking into more recycled content, things like that, and more in the line of the 3 other options. Right now, they are switching to packaging that has less carbon footprint and less materials, less packaging itself.
Yeah, and I think the switch to trying to get to monomaterial or as close to that, we heard from Griner Packaging earlier, where they have self-separating carton from the plastic, which obviously means that things can be recycled easier as well. Is a really great invention as well. A quick comment from the audience, actually. Ralph says it's interesting that all have positives effect on the whole supply chain. How is it compared? How is it measured? Specifically, if all brands are now pushing the sustainability topic, golden times waiting for us in 2024. Is it worldwide or is it just virtual marketing? So I suppose this is coming back to really what you're saying in terms of, as a consumer, you want to know it's verified, because I think we have got a lot of people talking about sustainability all the time. What's your kind of comments to that, if any?
So I think the results we are having with companies is because they are unique and they are isolated islands. So once this is more implemented everywhere, this could be different. But for example, we've been involved in digital deposit and refund systems where all the retailers, all the brands are involved, and the results are very similar. So mainly they will not see one brand or another doing this effort to the consumers, but of course you have this new direct to consumer channel that you can offer a better experience, tell your story behind that, etc. So then you can differentiate yourself with the other competitors.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as we're getting smarter as consumers, and as legal restrictions are being in place for people who just want to say, yeah, we do lots of green stuff, are coming into place. I also think this type of actions where consumers are involved in the process of doing something good is actually then going to bring it back to reality as well. You won't be able to just claim something, but actually I know that Carrefour must be interested, because they're giving me the ability as a consumer to learn to how to make the right decisions with recycling. So I think there's quite a piece there where we can talk about the verification or the authenticity of claims based on how the consumers can actually interact with it as well.
Exactly.
Ivan, we're coming up to the end of the session. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing everything. But before we leave, just a quick last question, which is, what advice would you give to any companies who are looking to unlock the green potential of their packaging and drive some meaningful change in consumer behaviour? What's your advice there? One leaving sentiment from Ivan, please.
I would say experiment with connected packaging and try to be innovative into that consumer interface. So offer a good connected experience, not just because you think of that. You mainly talk to your consumers and ask them what they want.
Yeah.
And for example, offering recycling information, this could be also doing test A, test B, and see if the engagement is different. So test, trial, and try to be brave and connect your packaging.
Absolutely. I couldn't disagree with anything you said there, Ivan. Absolutely. Think about connected packaging. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting insight. It has been fantastic having you. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. And don't go away. Everybody stay around, because we've got a fantastic session coming up. Thomas Volmuth is going to be discussing market success with digital packaging and harnessing the power of digital variable printing. So stick around. We'll be back in 5 minutes.